I will be showing you how you can get exactly this kind of terminal, okay, with the prompt and everything else for yourself. Now, real quick, if you don't know who I am, I'm Samarth BA. I've been racing Hyprland for over 3 years and I help other users make amazing setups without wasting time. Let's get into it. Now, the terminal that I'm using over here is going to be kitty. So if I just show you my kitty config, it's going to be in config, kitty, and kitty.conf. Now, by the way, if you're wondering what this colors folder is about, I go into it in much more detail inside HyperAccelerator, which is the first link in the description. But basically, it's a program where I teach you how to make custom theme switches like this one, okay? And along with performance tweaks like this, icon over here, which allows me to change between different power profiles, right? I teach you how to do this and a hell of a lot more. And by the way, I'm planning to change platforms for HyperAccelerator, and because of which you can get it for a lower price than it usually is if you just click the first link in the description right now. To be honest, I don't know when I'm going to finish porting Accelerator over there, so you might as well just lock in your price while it's lower compared to the usual, right? And by the way, this is the other theme that we have. We have Noir as well. This looks pretty damn sick. And as you can see, of course, the terminal color scheme also adapts to whatever theme that we have currently selected. You can also change this to something like Rosé Pine. Yeah, it complains a little bit, but it fixes itself too, as you can see over here. Okay, now let's open kitty.conf, just kitty.conf, and here is what we have. And by the way, if you're wondering how to get this blur effect in your terminal, I have made a video about it previously. You can just, click on my channel and go and check that out if you want to. Okay, now that's that. First of all, we're including this colors/colors.conf file, which is the theme switcher thing I showed you earlier. Then we have the font family, which is Geist Mono Nerd font, which is what gives us this beautiful font. And then we're just setting the font size to 13. Now there's a reason why for certain nerd fonts and for terminal fonts in general, we pick the size 13, because look at it this way, okay? Let me open a new terminal, or I'll just reset the size of this. Let's go back to what it was, this much, okay. Now if I change the font size to something like 14, just watch what happens. So it gets a little too big, and not just that, but the line height is messed with a little. And so right now with font size 13 for Geist Mono Nerd font, the line height seems to be pretty perfect, as you can see. So I can echo this is a line and then put in a backslash. I can also echo this too, something like hello. And as you can see over here, the line spacing is not half bad. Now, if I change this to something like 14 or 14.5 or any other number, basically, it might start to look a little weird. So I can just press Control-Shift-F5 to reload. And when I do that, yeah. You know what? To be honest, it doesn't seem that big of a deal, but sometimes when you pick the right font, right in this case is actually wrong in terms of the line height, but when you pick a certain font and then you change the font size to something that doesn't really click, what happens is the line height gets all messed up and then it doesn't look good. Like this caret symbol, it seems to be hovering, not exactly in the center of this text. Like this caret, this arrow doesn't point exactly in the center, and that can be kind of pissing off if you pay attention to detail. But anyway, that's that. Okay, so we'll just remove this, make it 13, Control-Shift-F5. And you can also just kind of tell, okay, so this is what I mean by the font clicking, okay? Let's open NWG look, and then let's show you what's going on. So this is the font that I have right now, okay? This. Now, as you can see right now, it's set to 11.5. Now, let me change it to something like 11, and look at what happens. It just, like the font rendering and the way the font looks, it just changes completely. Like it doesn't look that good. Okay, I can just keep increasing the size. And yeah, you know what? This can probably be illustrated better if I pick a different font. Yeah, as you can see here, like compare 11 to 12, and then you can just see how much clearer the text gets when you change from 11 to 12. And even if we just make this 11.5, like the clarity of the text still remains, even though the size has increased a little bit compared to 11. It's a little bit hard to explain, but when you mess around with fonts like that in NWG look and follow the other instructions that I give you about font rendering and colors and theme switches and whatnot, which is the first link in the description, of course, you get to know exactly how this kind of stuff works. And you start to develop a keen eye for attention to detail, which is very useful when you're making setups like this one, where you got to pay attention to detail in every single pixel. Like, for example, this icon, if I had not been using the right font, which I have covered, in one of my other videos, this font, as in this icon, would have to be separated from this text with a bunch of spaces instead of just one. So yeah, it's just those little things which you can't find elsewhere. Okay, now ligatures. Ligatures, okay, let's discuss this option. Disable ligatures is basically never. Now what this means is we can put in an arrow like this, and as you can see over here, as soon as I put in a hyphen and then I put in an angled bracket, it automatically becomes an arrow. Now if I change disable ligatures to always, okay, always is probably a setting. Let's see. Okay, always is not a setting, so we can just change that to something like yes. Disable ligatures to yes, and when we do that, okay. So basically, you know what? Yes or always is not the option that we're using to actually disable the ligatures, but anyway, you know what? Let's just see if this works. Yeah, it has to be something else that's defined in Kitty's wiki, but ligatures, as you saw previously, is the combination or like the merging, the amalgamation, whatever you want to call it, of two characters in order to form one glyph. Like this looks like one glyph, right? One glyph you can basically consider it to be like one letter. So you're taking a hyphen, or you can even take an equal sign and then put an angled bracket after that, and this is the arrow that you get. You can also do this with two equal signs and then an angled bracket. So the symbol that evolves when you put two equal signs and then an angle bracket is just completely different and new. That wouldn't be possible unless you had ligatures. So a ligature is basically, like tying something together. It's kind of like a suture. So let's say you perform brain surgery on somebody, and then, you gotta, tie you gotta tie the top part of the head back to the skull. You use sutures and ligatures to get that done. Yeah. Okay, then next up, we're just disabling audio bell, because if we don't, we're just going to hear that annoying ass, what do you call it, sound whenever you press backspace and when there's no more text, which is not fun to listen to. Then, of course, shell is ZSH. You're just making that clear. And I'll also show you how to get this kind of set up real quick. Then shell integration is no cursor. So what this basically means is that we won't get the, what do you call it, the line beam. So what happens is that you have different types of cursors. You have underscore, you have line instead of a thick block, and then you also have a couple of different cursor options. Now, setting this shell integration no cursor thing, what this does is basically allows you to have this kind of a thick block for your cursor, no matter whether the window is focused, unfocused, whatever. Okay, then cursor shape is block. That's what we need. URL color, I've just chosen this myself. I can honestly get rid of it. Doesn't matter much. URL style is curly. So if I type in a URL over here, something like saint1090x.github.io, it should actually, yeah, it should go somewhere, but yeah, that's that. Then remember window size. We don't want to remember that because there's no point. Then initial window width. Okay, there's also a reason why you don't want to remember the window size, because let's say that you force Kitty to remember the window size, okay? And then the window size was something like floating. So it was floating to be like this. Now, the Wayland compositor, Hyprland in this case, has to, do extra work in resizing this floating window looking dimensions to be tiled dimensions, which actually takes a bit more, memory and makes things a bit slower, which is why we just don't want to remember the window size, so that Hyprland does all the tiling automatically for us. Then initial window width and height, we're just defining that over here with columns. It's 78 columns for the width and 23 columns for the height. Window padding width, this is basically the padding. So the more padding you want, you just increase it. Okay, and you can press Ctrl Shift F5 to reload. A lot of padding, we don't want that too much, so 30 should be a good amount. Then cursor blink interval, pretty simple, that's 0. Background opacity, this is to get the blur effect that you saw earlier. Yeah, that's 0.5. Confirm OS window close. Now, this is also something unique. So what happens is that whenever we have like a background process running in the terminal, like in ZSH, for example, okay? Let's say there's a background ZSH process running. You don't know what the process ID is. You don't know how to kill it. So every single time you go and try to close the kitty window, it's going to show you like a warning. This program is running in the background. Do you want to kill it or not? It gets kind of annoying, especially when you don't know which process it is that you have to kill. So you might as well just ask Kitty not to bother you by typing in this command. And then under performance settings, I have just set sync to monitor to be no. This is basically vsync, right? So the refresh rate of the terminal is not going to be limited to the refresh rate of the monitor, which is 60 Hertz in this case. So if the terminal is wanting to display frame rates higher than 60 Hertz, 60 FPS, it is going to be allowed to do so because of the sync to monitor setting. Okay, now that is it for the terminal settings. As for the blur, it's actually pretty simple. Config, hyprland.conf, or rather it's in modules. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering what this module syntax is about, it's a little something I call modularity in Hyperaccelerator. So you can just click the first link in the description and check it out. I teach you how to make modules like this and the theme switches that I showed you earlier, and a hell of a lot more in extreme detail, like detail that you cannot possibly imagine. The entire program is like 9 hours long, by the way, and I spent almost 2 months making it, which means that you get the best quality information that you can't find anywhere else, because I've been doing this for the better part of 3 years. Okay, anyway, let's go to, where was that, decoration.conf, because that's where we keep the blur. And here, you can just copy these settings in order to get this same exact blur effect. Okay, you can just pause the video and copy these settings. I explain them in detail in another video that I've made, so if you want to know what they all mean, you can just go to that video and check it out. Okay, now for the zsh prompt. If you don't already have zsh as your shell, you can just yay-s zsh, and then you want to ch-sh-s bin zsh. Okay, now it's going to ask you for your password, and then once you type that in, you will have changed your shell to zsh. Okay, after that's done, you want to go over to this website, which is oh-my-zh. Once you go here, you can click on install oh-my-zsh, and then basically copy this command and paste it. So it's going to curl this path, okay, and it's going to execute this script. And this $sign syntax is basically take whatever the output of this command is, whatever the output, and then pass it to sh-c. So it's going to execute. So you can choose different methods depending on whether you want to use curl or wget. Just pick whatever, just copy this, and then paste it over here. And then hit enter. Now, of course, I've already installed oh-my-zsh, so I'm not going to do this. But once you do this, it should say oh-my-zsh is installed, and then you should get a different, prettier looking prompt compared to zsh's default prompt. Okay, now, we're not quite there yet. We're almost there. In order to get this kind of prompt, we need to install power level 10k. So let's look that up. Power level 10k. Okay, so it's this one by romcatv. You just click on this. Okay, here we are. Now scroll down, and as you can see over here, this is the prompt that I'm using. I'm using lean style. Instead of using 256 colors, using 8 colors. So whatever terminal colors that I have, those colors are the ones that are being used. Now you can just click on installation. Okay, click on oh-my-zsh because that's what we're using. Copy this, and then just paste it like so. Paste it in, and that should install power level 10k. Once you do that, it might give you another, confirmation message saying everything is good. Okay, once that's done, you want to type in p10k configure. Okay, now, if you have chosen the right font, which in my case, as I showed you earlier, was Geist Mono Nerd font. You can also use JetBrains Mono or Meslo LGS Mono Nerd font. Those two are pretty good fonts too, so you can just pick whatever. Just make sure to pick a nerd font. And you can pick whatever nerd font you want by going to nerdfonts.com and then looking for the font that you like. There's a lot of different fonts that we can pick from, like we have Fira Code, JetBrains Mono, Hack, Inconsolata, and then we have Geist Mono, Meslo LGS Nerd font. We have a lot of different fonts, so you can just pick whichever ones that you want. Click on font downloads and you can see all the fonts that they have. Okay. Here, yeah, we have IBM, Advaita Mono. This one's new. Agave, Anonymize, Arimo, Orulent, Atkinson Mono. We have a lot of different fonts. So you can just pick whichever one, and once you pull up p10k configure, this is what you're going to see. So we're going to then Answer these questions. Does this look like a diamond? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, just read all these questions. Do all these icons fit between the crosses? Yes, there is no overlap. And then here is where we pick the prompt style. So we pick lean Unicode because we don't want ASCII. We want this sweet looking caret symbol. And then 8 colors because we want our terminal colors to be used. No, don't show the current time. We want 2 lines for the prompt. Disconnected because we don't want this part to be connected. But we want the left frame, so we pick 2. Frame color, we want white. We want sparse to make things easier to read. Few icons, concise, enable transient prompt. So basically transient prompt is this feature where if you type in a command and hit enter, you're not going to see the path and the branch for that command. So if I just show you, I type in hello over here, as you can see, it just shows the caret symbol and that. You don't see the path from which the command was executed and whatnot. You don't see this stuff repeated. Okay, so we can enable that. It looks pretty sweet. 1, yes, and that's it. Done. That should give you a prompt like this one. Okay, now that should pretty much be it as to how you can get a terminal like the one that I have over here. If you want a setup that looks blazing fast and pretty without having to waste time figuring out how to make it yourself, go ahead and click the first link in the description. I show you how to make theme switchers, squeeze every last bit of performance out of your system, and have fun. And not just that, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure when I'm going to finish porting the hyper accelerator over to the different platforms, so you might as well just grab it now while the price is less. If you liked the video, hit like, and if you want to see more content like this in your feed, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Stay rising.